When she returned with 12 police officers, what he did next left everyone speechless. It was a golden late afternoon, with the last rays of sunlight bathing Mary's house, a grand and charming home that had become a haven of memories over the years. The house stood as a testament to stories of love, loss, and resilience. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, it reflected Mary herself, solid, welcoming, and filled with details only those who lived there could truly understand. From the polished dark wooden furniture to the flowers she personally tended in the garden, every corner of the house carried a story. Mary, a woman in her 60s, had a serene demeanor, but her eyes held a shadow of melancholy. Since the death of her husband, Miguel, 5 years earlier, she had dedicated herself to keeping the house alive and full of meaning. Miguel had been her great love, and even after his passing, Mary preserved everything he cherished. The wall clock he had repaired with such care still kept time, and the wooden bench under the mango tree in the backyard remained a sacred space where they used to share their thoughts about life. Daniel, Mary's only son, had always been her pride. A hard-working and honest man, he had a big heart but was easily influenced. When he introduced his girlfriend, Lisa, to Mary, she was delighted to see him in love. Lisa seemed perfect, polite, charming, and with a magnetic presence. However, there was something about her that Mary couldn't quite decipher, a quiet unease that began to grow over time. Lisa, with her sharp eyes and impeccable smile, was the opposite of Mary. Where Mary was calm and reserved, Lisa was vibrant and bold. Her presence filled the room with energy, but that energy also carried a subtle arrogance, as if she were constantly evaluating those around her. When Lisa and Daniel moved into Mary's house, the arrangement seemed harmonious at first. Lisa volunteered to help with chores, complimented Mary's cooking, and always maintained a sweet, friendly tone. But behind that friendly facade, Lisa started observing everything closely. She examined the antique furniture, admired Miguel's portraits hanging on the walls, and even inspected the documents stored in Mary's desk. It didn't take long for her true intentions to surface. Lisa saw more than just a home, she saw an opportunity. A valuable property that, if manipulated properly, could become hers and Daniel's alone. Mary began noticing subtle changes. Lisa made comments about how the house was too big for just one person, or suggested that Mary should relax more and let them take on more responsibilities. These remarks, though spoken with apparent care, carried a weight that Mary couldn't ignore. Gradually, Lisa started making decisions about the house, changing small things like the arrangement of furniture or suggesting unnecessary renovations, always claiming they were for the good of everyone. The atmosphere in the house began to shift. Daniel, caught between his mother and his wife, believed Lisa was only trying to help. He didn't see the growing tension in Mary's eyes or the discomfort in her gestures when Lisa entered the room. What had once been a home full of happy memories was now turning into a stage for manipulation. Mary, accustomed to solving issues with patience and dialogue, didn't know how to respond. She tried to maintain harmony, but something deep inside her whispered that this fragile peace wouldn't last long. As weeks passed, Lisa's influence over the household deepened. She began subtly isolating Mary, presenting herself as the more capable and practical member of the family. Daniel, blinded by his love for Lisa, failed to notice how his wife's actions chipped away at his mother's confidence. Mary, once a strong and self-assured woman, began questioning her own decisions. Lisa's plan moved forward step by step, carefully and methodically. She started spreading subtle insinuations among the neighbors. "Mary's been forgetting things a lot lately," she would say with a concerned tone, ensuring her words sounded more like genuine worry than malicious gossip. "I think she's overwhelmed with everything, poor thing." It wasn't long before these whispers reached Daniel. Lisa's manipulation didn't stop at her words, she created little scenarios to reinforce her claims. She would rearrange items around the house and then pretend to find them in odd places, blaming Mary's supposed forgetfulness. One afternoon, Lisa deliberately left the stove on and later accused Mary of negligence, suggesting that it could have caused a fire. "You know, Daniel," Lisa said one evening as they sat in the living room, "I think your mother might need professional help. She's been so forgetful and disoriented lately. It's not safe for her to manage the house on her own anymore." Daniel looked conflicted, his brow furrowing as he processed Lisa's words. "She's been under a lot of stress," he murmured, trying to rationalize his mother's behavior. "Maybe it's just that." Lisa placed a gentle hand on his arm and leaned closer, her voice soft but insistent. "I understand it's hard to admit, but this could be something serious. What if she leaves the door unlocked or forgets to turn off the stove again? I just want to make sure she's safe." Mary, overhearing their conversation from the hallway, felt a pang of anger and disbelief. She had always been meticulous about her responsibilities, and Lisa's fabrications were slowly dismantling the life she had built. For the first time, Mary began to understand the depth of Lisa's manipulations. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Mary noticed that Daniel started treating her differently, his tone more cautious, almost pitying. He no longer confided in her the way he used to, and his rare smiles felt forced. Lisa, meanwhile, grew bolder. She took over household decisions without consulting Mary, from redecorating the living room to deciding what groceries to buy. Mary felt like a stranger in her own home. One morning, Lisa escalated her efforts. She hosted a small gathering with neighbors under the guise of a friendly tea party. Mary, who had been deliberately left out of the planning, walked into the living room to find the group laughing and chatting. Lisa greeted her warmly but with an undertone that felt condescending. "Mary, we were just talking about how much you've done for this house. It must be exhausting to manage everything by yourself," Lisa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've done such a great job, but maybe it's time to let someone else take care of things." Mary clenched her fists, feeling the weight of judgmental gazes from the neighbors. She forced a smile and retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She felt cornered, trapped in a situation that seemed to be spiraling out of her control. Lisa's ultimate goal began to take shape: she wanted the house, and she wanted Mary out of the way. The next step in her plan would be to convince Daniel that Mary was no longer capable of living alone. If she succeeded, Mary would not only lose her home but also her sense of identity. Mary, however, was no fool. Though hurt and shaken, she began paying closer attention to Lisa's behavior. There was something about the younger woman's confidence that felt unnatural, almost rehearsed. Deep down, Mary knew that if she didn't act soon, everything she held dear would slip away. Translation into English: linear language. As weeks passed, Lisa's influence over the household deepened. She began subtly isolating Mary, presenting herself as the more capable and practical member of the family. Daniel, blinded by his love for Lisa, failed to notice how his wife's actions chipped away at his mother's confidence. Mary, once a strong and self-assured woman, began questioning her own decisions. Lisa's plan moved forward step by step, carefully and methodically. She started spreading subtle insinuations among the neighbors. "Mary's been forgetting things a lot lately," she would say with a concerned tone, ensuring her words sounded more like genuine worry than malicious gossip. "I think she's overwhelmed with everything, poor thing." It wasn't long before these whispers reached Daniel. Lisa's manipulation didn't stop at her words, she created little scenarios to reinforce her claims. She would rearrange items around the house and then pretend to find them in odd places, blaming Mary's supposed forgetfulness. One afternoon, Lisa deliberately left the stove on and later accused Mary of negligence, suggesting that it could have caused a fire. "You know, Daniel," Lisa said one evening as they sat in the living room, "I think your mother might need professional help. She's been so forgetful and disoriented lately. It's not safe for her to manage the house on her own anymore." Daniel looked conflicted, his brow furrowing as he processed Lisa's words. "She's been under a lot of stress," he murmured, trying to rationalize his mother's behavior. "Maybe it's just that." Lisa placed a gentle hand on his arm and leaned closer, her voice soft but insistent. "I understand it's hard to admit, but this could be something serious. What if she leaves the door unlocked or forgets to turn off the stove again? I just want to make sure she's safe. Mary, overhearing their conversation from the hallway, felt a pang of anger and disbelief. She had always been meticulous about her responsibilities, and Lisa's fabrications were slowly dismantling the life she had built. For the first time, Mary began to understand the depth of Lisa's manipulations. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Mary noticed that Daniel started treating her differently, his tone more cautious, almost pitying. He no longer confided in her the way he used to, and his rare smiles felt forced. Lisa, meanwhile, grew bolder. She took over household decisions without consulting Mary, from redecorating the living room to deciding what groceries to buy. Mary felt like a stranger in her own home. One morning, Lisa escalated her efforts. She hosted a small gathering with neighbors under the guise of a friendly tea party. Mary, who had been deliberately left out of the planning, walked into the living room to find the group laughing and chatting. Lisa greeted her warmly but with an undertone that felt condescending. "Mary, we were just talking about how much you've done for this house. It must be exhausting to manage everything by yourself," Lisa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've done such a great job, but maybe it's time to let someone else take care of things." Mary clenched her fists, feeling the weight of judgmental gazes from the neighbors. She forced a smile and retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She felt cornered, trapped in a situation that seemed to be spiraling out of her control. Lisa's ultimate goal began to take shape. She wanted the house, and she wanted Mary out of the way. The next step in her plan would be to convince Daniel that Mary was no longer capable of living alone. If she succeeded, Mary would not only lose her home but also her sense of identity. Mary, however, was no fool. Though hurt and shaken, she began paying closer attention to Lisa's behavior. There was something about the younger woman's confidence that felt unnatural, almost rehearsed. Deep down, Mary knew that if she didn't act soon, everything she held dear would slip away. Mary's unease turned into a quiet determination. She started paying closer attention to Lisa's actions, observing the patterns of her manipulations. Every word, every gesture, every orchestrated mistake was filed away in Mary's mind like pieces of a puzzle. She didn't confront Lisa immediately. Instead, she chose to wait and gather evidence, knowing that a single misstep could give Lisa the upper hand. One evening, while Lisa and Daniel were out, Mary decided to investigate. She started in Lisa's room, what had once been Daniel's childhood bedroom but had been completely transformed under Lisa's influence. The once cozy space was now sterile and minimalist, filled with Lisa's expensive taste in decor. Mary hesitated, feeling uneasy about invading their privacy, but she knew she had to act. Mary searched through the drawers, careful not to disturb anything. At first, it seemed like Lisa had nothing to hide. Everything was neatly arranged, almost too perfect. But then, tucked beneath a stack of magazines, Mary found an envelope. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold, emails printed out, referencing transactions Mary didn't fully understand. They mentioned names she didn't recognize and payments that didn't align with anything she knew about Lisa's life. As Mary read further, she found references to something far darker. One email alluded to arranging a transfer and included vague details about children. The word sent chills down her spine. Could Lisa be involved in something illegal? Mary didn't fully grasp the scope of what she had uncovered, but she knew it wasn't right. Mary carefully put the documents back where she found them, her hands trembling. She couldn't confront Lisa directly, not yet. She needed help. That night, she sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen, clutching a cup of tea as she tried to piece together what to do. She thought of calling the police, but what evidence did she have? A few emails wouldn't be enough, and Lisa could easily turn the situation against her. The next day, Mary decided to confide in someone she trusted. She visited her neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, an elderly man who had known her and her family for decades. Mr. Alvarez was sharp despite his age and had a knack for noticing things others missed. After inviting him for tea, Mary cautiously shared what she had discovered, leaving out the more extreme details about the emails. "I feel like she's trying to push me out of my own home," Mary admitted, her voice trembling. "But there's more to it. I found some papers, strange ones. I don't know what to make of them, but they scare me." Mr. Alvarez listened intently, his face growing serious. "Mary, I've had my suspicions about Lisa for a while now. She's too polished, too calculating. If you found something, it might mean she's hiding more than you realize." He offered to help, suggesting they keep a close watch on Lisa's activities. "Be careful," he warned. "She's clever, and if she senses you're onto her, she'll make her move faster." Meanwhile, Lisa's confidence grew. She noticed that Daniel was becoming more distant from Mary, exactly as she had planned. One evening, she decided to take things a step further by staging a confrontation. At dinner, Lisa brought up Mary's forgetfulness in front of Daniel, turning to him with a sigh. "Daniel, I'm really worried about your mom. Today she left the front door unlocked again. Luckily, I noticed before anything happened." Mary's heart raced, but she kept her expression calm. "That's not true," she said firmly, meeting Lisa's gaze. Lisa feigned surprise, her tone sweet but condescending. "Oh, Mary, maybe you didn't realize. It's okay, it happens to everyone as they get older." Daniel frowned, looking between the two women. "Let's not argue about this," he said, his voice tense. Mary decided it was time to push back, but with subtlety. "Lisa, if you're so concerned, maybe you could focus on what's happening in your own life instead of creating problems where there are none," she said, her tone sharp but measured. Lisa's smile faltered for a brief second, but she quickly recovered. "I only want what's best for everyone," she said, casting a meaningful glance at Daniel. That night, Mary felt both a small sense of victory and a growing dread. Lisa's veneer was cracking, but it wouldn't be long before she retaliated. Mary knew she had to act quickly. In the days that followed, Mary and Mr. Alvarez began discreetly watching Lisa. They noticed small but suspicious details. Lisa frequently left the house late at night, often returning just before dawn. She had visitors Mary had never seen before, well-dressed men and women who stayed for short periods and always seemed nervous. One evening, Mr. Alvarez managed to photograph one of Lisa's mysterious visitors leaving the house. The man had a briefcase and appeared to be in a hurry. Mary and Mr. Alvarez decided it was time to escalate their efforts. They contacted a young detective, Clara, who had recently moved into the neighborhood. Clara had a reputation for being relentless and had already gained the trust of several residents. When Mary shared what she had discovered, including the emails and Mr. Alvarez's photographs, Clara's expression turned serious. "This is bigger than you realize," Clara said. "We need to act carefully, but I'll help you. If Lisa is involved in something illegal, we'll find out." Mary felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks, but she knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger. Lisa wasn't someone who gave up easily, and Mary had a sinking feeling that the storm was only beginning. With Clara now on their side, Mary and Mr. Alvarez felt a renewed sense of purpose, though the weight of their suspicions loomed heavily. Clara had promised to investigate Lisa quietly, knowing that even the slightest misstep could alert her and jeopardize everything. Days turned into a tense waiting game. Lisa, oblivious to the scrutiny, continued to act as if she were untouchable. Her confidence bordered on arrogance, and she grew more controlling within the house. She began making unilateral decisions about expenses, openly suggesting that Mary's age and fragile state meant she couldn't handle the responsibilities of ownership. One evening, as Mary prepared tea in the kitchen, Clara arrived unexpectedly, carrying a thin folder. She set it down on the dining table and motioned for Mary and Mr. Alvarez to sit. Daniel was out with friends, leaving them some privacy. "I've been digging," Clara said, her tone serious but controlled. She opened the folder to reveal a collection of documents and photographs. Lisa is connected to a network I've been tracking for months. It's a group involved in child trafficking. She's not at the top, but she's playing a significant role as a liaison. The emails you found, Mary, were a critical piece of the puzzle. Mary's hands trembled as she flipped through the evidence. Pictures of unfamiliar people meeting Lisa, transaction logs, and even surveillance images of Lisa entering a building that Clara identified as a known hub for illegal activity. Does Daniel have any idea? Mary asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara shook her head. From everything I've seen, Lisa has kept him completely in the dark. She's smart about separating her personal life from her illegal activities. But that makes her even more dangerous. Mr. Alvarez leaned forward, his expression grim. What's the next step? We need more, Clara said. This evidence is strong, but not enough for an airtight case. Lisa's network is protected by layers of intermediaries, and they're meticulous about covering their tracks. If we confront her now, she'll disappear before we can bring anyone else down. Mary nodded, determination hardening in her chest. What can I do? Clara hesitated for a moment. It's risky, but if you can keep her comfortable, make her believe she's still in control, we might be able to catch her in the act. I'll need time to coordinate with my team. The plan left Mary uneasy, but she agreed. For the next few days, she played her part carefully, avoiding any signs of suspicion when interacting with Lisa. She allowed Lisa to dominate conversations and even feigned agreement with some of her suggestions about the house. Lisa, for her part, seemed pleased with her apparent victory. She began moving more freely, arranging secretive meetings and taking calls with less caution. Mary listened carefully whenever Lisa's hushed voice echoed from the other side of the house. She caught fragments of conversations, words like shipment and timelines, enough to confirm that Lisa was involved in something sinister. One night, Lisa made a critical mistake. She left her phone on the dining table while stepping out of the room to take another call. Seizing the opportunity, Mary quickly unlocked the phone, which Lisa had carelessly left without a passcode. Mary scrolled through messages and found chilling details, dates, locations, and mentions of specific packages. She used her own phone to snap photos of the screen before placing Lisa's phone exactly where she had left it. The next day, Mary handed the photos to Clara, who immediately recognized several of the addresses as drop-off points for the trafficking network. This is it, Clara said. We can set up surveillance and intercept their next move. But Mary, this is going to escalate quickly. You need to be prepared for backlash. As Clara coordinated with law enforcement, Mary tried to keep the household routine as normal as possible. But the weight of the situation was unbearable. She wanted to warn Daniel, to shield him from the inevitable fallout, but Clara had advised against it. Lisa was too manipulative. If Daniel tipped her off, everything would collapse. The tension came to a head one evening when Lisa returned home unexpectedly early. Mary was in the living room, sorting through old photo albums to calm her nerves, when Lisa stormed in, her face tight with suspicion. Mary, Lisa said sharply, her tone no longer sweet or accommodating. Where's my phone? Mary froze for a moment, quickly composing herself. I haven't seen it. Did you leave it in the car? Lisa's eyes narrowed as if she were trying to read Mary's thoughts. After a long pause, she smiled, a cold, calculated expression that sent chills down Mary's spine. I'll find it, Lisa said, her tone dripping with a menace she no longer bothered to hide. As Lisa turned and left the room, Mary exhaled shakily. She knew Lisa was beginning to suspect something, and that meant their time was running out. The storm Clara had warned about was now on the horizon, and Mary braced herself for what was to come. The following days were a nerve-wracking test of endurance for Mary. Lisa's behavior grew erratic, her mood swinging between forced politeness and icy hostility. It was clear that she sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't yet put her finger on it. Mary kept her composure, knowing that any sign of fear or weakness could give Lisa the edge she needed. Meanwhile, Clara and her team finalized their plan. The evidence Mary had provided allowed them to pinpoint the date and location of the next trafficking operation. It would take place at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a known hotspot for illicit activity. Clara assured Mary that they were ready to intervene, but it would require impeccable timing. Mary felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She couldn't falter now. She spent her days preparing herself emotionally, replaying Clara's advice in her mind: stay calm, act normal, and don't let Lisa suspect anything. One evening, Mary was sitting in the living room when Lisa entered, carrying a cup of tea. Her smile was too deliberate, her movements too measured. She sat across from Mary, watching her intently. "You've been quiet lately," Lisa said, her tone casual but probing. Mary didn't flinch. "Just trying to stay out of the way. I know how busy you and Daniel have been." Lisa tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "That's thoughtful of you. I know this house can feel overwhelming sometimes." Mary met her gaze evenly, refusing to let Lisa see the turmoil behind her calm exterior. "It's my home," she said softly. "It's always been a comfort to me." Lisa's smile tightened. "Of course. That's why I want to make sure you're comfortable, why we're here to help you. You can trust us, Mary." The words felt like a veiled threat, but Mary didn't let it rattle her. "I'm grateful for that," she replied simply. Lisa's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer before she stood and left the room. Mary exhaled slowly, her heartbeat steadying. She knew Lisa was testing her, and she had to remain vigilant. The night of the operation arrived. Mary stayed home while Clara and her team prepared to intercept the trafficking exchange at the warehouse. Daniel had gone out for the evening, leaving Mary and Lisa alone in the house. The atmosphere was suffocating, every moment fraught with unspoken tension. Mary sat in the kitchen, pretending to read a book, while Lisa moved about the house with restless energy. Every noise, every creak of the floorboards, every distant car engine, made Mary's nerves tighten. She clung to the hope that Clara and her team would succeed and end this nightmare. Hours passed. The house was eerily quiet when the sound of Lisa's phone vibrating broke the stillness. Lisa answered quickly, her voice low but urgent. Mary couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable: something had gone wrong. Lisa stormed into the kitchen, her expression a mix of anger and panic. "I have to leave for a while," she said brusquely. Mary set her book down, feigning curiosity. "This late? Is everything all right?" Lisa hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just business. Don't wait up." As Lisa grabbed her keys and left, Mary's stomach churned. She knew Lisa was heading to the warehouse, likely to salvage whatever she could. Mary wanted desperately to call Clara, but she'd been instructed not to interfere or make contact during the operation. The minutes crawled by. Mary paced the kitchen, her mind racing with possibilities. She imagined the confrontation unfolding at the warehouse, Clara's team facing Lisa and her associates. Finally, the phone rang. Mary snatched it up, her hands trembling. "It's Clara," the voice on the other end said. "We've got her, Mary. Lisa and several others were arrested at the warehouse. The operation is shut down, and the children are safe." Relief washed over Mary, and tears welled in her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank you." "There's more," Clara continued. "We found additional evidence that will help prosecute not just Lisa but others higher up in the network. Mary, your courage made this possible." Mary hung up the phone and sat down, her hands shaking. The nightmare was over, but the aftermath would be complicated. She thought of Daniel and how he would react to the truth. Hours later, Daniel returned home to find Mary waiting for him in the living room. The weight of the evening hung heavily in the air. "Mom. What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Mary took a deep breath. Daniel, there's something you need to know about Lisa. As she began to explain, Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief and finally to heartbreak. The woman he thought he knew, the life they had built together, it was all a lie. The next few days were a blur. Lisa's arrest made headlines, and Daniel was forced to confront the truth about his wife. He stayed with Mary, grappling with feelings of betrayal and guilt. Though the road ahead would be long, Mary felt a sense of hope for the first time in months. The house that Lisa had tried to take from her now stood as a symbol of resilience, and the bond between mother and son began to heal, stronger than ever before. The days following Lisa's arrest were heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow. Mary found herself torn between the satisfaction of seeing justice served and the pain of watching her son grapple with the fallout. Daniel was devastated. The betrayal cut deeply, and his emotions swung between anger and heartbreak. He spent long hours in silence, staring out the window or retreating to his old bedroom, where remnants of his simpler, happier life seemed to haunt him. Mary, though exhausted by the ordeal, remained a steady presence. She prepared meals, sat with Daniel when he needed company, and gave him space when he asked for it. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner, Daniel finally broke the silence. "I don't understand how I didn't see it," he said, his voice low and strained. "I trusted her. I believed everything she said." Mary reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Daniel, Lisa was a master manipulator. She fooled everyone, not just you. This wasn't your fault." He looked up, his eyes filled with anguish. "But I didn't believe you, Mom. I let her turn me against you. I let her take over this house, your house." Mary squeezed his hand gently. "What matters is that we're here now, together. We survived this, Daniel. And we'll heal from it, one step at a time." The conversation marked the beginning of a slow but meaningful reconciliation between mother and son. Over the following weeks, Daniel started to open up about his feelings, sharing memories of Lisa that now felt tainted by her deceit. Each time he spoke, Mary listened patiently, offering comfort without judgment. Meanwhile, the legal case against Lisa and the trafficking network moved forward rapidly. Clara kept Mary updated, occasionally stopping by the house to share news. The evidence Mary had helped uncover proved to be the linchpin in dismantling the operation. Several high-ranking members of the network were arrested, and the children rescued from the warehouse were reunited with their families or placed in safe care. One afternoon, Clara arrived with an update. She sat with Mary and Daniel in the living room, her expression serious but hopeful. "The case against Lisa is solid," Clara said. "She's cooperating, likely to reduce her sentence, but it won't change the outcome. She'll be facing significant prison time. And thanks to her testimony, we've been able to identify others involved. This operation has had a huge impact." Daniel nodded, though his face remained tense. "What about the media? They've been calling, leaving messages. I don't want this story to follow us forever." Clara offered a reassuring smile. "You're not the focus. The authorities are keeping the details about your family out of the public eye as much as possible. The press is more interested in the network itself." After Clara left, Mary noticed that Daniel seemed lighter, as if the weight of Lisa's betrayal was beginning to lift. That evening, he approached her with a suggestion. "Mom, I think we should do something with the house," he said hesitantly. "Something positive, something that honors everything you've been through. Maybe turn it into a place that helps people." Mary felt a swell of pride and affection for her son. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "But maybe a community space, or a shelter for kids who need help. This house has been through so much, it feels right to give it a new purpose." Mary considered his words carefully. The house, with all its memories and scars, had been her sanctuary for decades. But perhaps Daniel was right. Perhaps it was time to let it evolve into something more. Over the next few weeks, they began exploring ideas. They reached out to local organizations, spoke with community leaders, and brainstormed ways to transform the house into a beacon of hope. The process was therapeutic for both of them, a way to channel their pain into something meaningful. As renovations began, Mary and Daniel worked side by side, rediscovering the bond they had almost lost. They repainted the walls, cleared out old furniture, and created spaces that felt warm and inviting. On the day the community center opened, the house was filled with laughter and light. Neighbors, friends, and even some of the children who had been rescued came to celebrate. Mary stood by Daniel's side, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the house transform once again, not into a symbol of manipulation and control, but into a place of healing and love. That evening, as the last guests left and the house settled into a peaceful quiet, Daniel turned to Mary. "We did it," he said softly. Mary smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "We did. And Miguel would be proud of us." The journey had been painful and harrowing, but Mary and Daniel had reclaimed their lives and their home. Together, they faced the future with renewed hope, knowing they had not only survived but found a way to thrive. In the weeks following the opening of the community center, the house buzzed with new life. Once a place weighed down by tension and manipulation, it now resonated with laughter, warmth, and purpose. Children from all over the neighborhood filled the halls, attending after-school programs, art workshops, and mentorship sessions. Mary and Daniel had worked tirelessly to turn the house into a sanctuary, and the results exceeded their expectations. Mary found herself taking on the role of a mentor for some of the children, sharing her stories of resilience and listening to theirs. Each child who stepped through the doors brought a unique energy to the space, and Mary felt a renewed sense of purpose in helping them. Daniel, too, immersed himself in the work. He managed the logistics, ensuring that the programs ran smoothly, but he also became a confidant for many of the teenagers who needed a positive male role model. Slowly, he began to rebuild his own confidence, realizing that his past mistakes didn't define him. One evening, after a particularly lively day at the center, Mary and Daniel sat on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the garden. The soft hum of crickets filled the air, and the scent of blooming jasmine wafted around them. "This feels different," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Good different. Like this house is finally alive again." Mary nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's as if it was waiting for this all along. All the pain, all the struggles, it led us here." Daniel looked at her, a mix of gratitude and admiration in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom. For everything. For not giving up on me, even when I made it so hard for you." Mary reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're my son, Daniel. Nothing could ever make me stop loving you. And look at what we've created together. Your father would be so proud of you." As they sat there, a sense of peace settled over them, the kind that only comes after surviving a storm. But even as they embraced this new chapter, life had more challenges in store. A week later, Clara visited unexpectedly, her face etched with concern. She asked to speak to Mary and Daniel privately, and they gathered in the cozy living room that had become a hub of warmth and community. "I need to tell you something," Clara began, her voice steady but serious. "While Lisa and her associates are behind bars, the investigation isn't over. There are still people connected to the network who are out there, and we've received information that some of them might be aware of your involvement in exposing the operation." Mary's heart sank, and she glanced at Daniel, who immediately tensed. "Are we in danger?" Mary asked. "We don't have evidence of an immediate threat," Clara reassured them, "but it's important to stay cautious. You both played a significant role in taking down this network, and some of the people involved might hold grudges. I've already spoken to the authorities about increasing security around the center and your home." Daniel clenched his fists. "If they come for us, we'll fight back. We've been through too much to let them take this from us." Mary placed a calming hand on his arm. Let's not jump to conclusions. Clara, what else can we do to stay safe? For now, just be aware of your surroundings, Clara said. I'll stay in touch and let you know if anything develops. But I wanted to prepare you, just in case. After Clara left, a quiet tension settled over the house. Daniel's protective instincts kicked in, and he began double-checking locks and adding security measures to the property. Mary, while worried, refused to let fear dictate her life. The center continued to operate as usual, but Mary found herself watching the faces of strangers more carefully, wondering if any of them posed a threat. The joy and hope they had built in the house now carried a fragile edge, as if the shadows of the past were creeping back in. One night, as Mary sat in her bedroom going through old photo albums, she came across a picture of her younger self with Miguel and a very young Daniel. They were standing in front of the house, their faces glowing with happiness. Mary traced the edges of the photo with her fingers, drawing strength from the memory. We've faced darkness before, she whispered to herself. And we've come out stronger. We'll do it again. Mary and Daniel didn't know what the future held, but they resolved to face it together. The house, now a beacon of hope for so many, stood as a testament to their resilience. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready. The days turned into weeks, and though the warning from Clara lingered in their minds, Mary and Daniel refused to let fear take over. The community center thrived, its programs expanding to include counseling services and job training workshops. The house was no longer just a building, it had become a lifeline for those in need. One afternoon, Mary was in the garden tending to her roses when she noticed a man standing by the gate. He was tall, with an unkempt beard and eyes that darted nervously. He wore a faded jacket, his hands stuffed into the pockets as if hiding something. Mary straightened, her heartbeat quickening as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease bubbling inside her. The man hesitated before stepping closer. "I heard about the center," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I need help. For my son." Mary's tension eased slightly, though she remained cautious. "What kind of help?" The man glanced over his shoulder, as if worried someone might be watching. "He's struggling. I lost my job, and we've been living out of our car. Someone told me this place could help." Mary softened, her instinct to protect and nurture taking over. "Of course. Come inside, and we'll see what we can do." As she guided him through the house, Daniel appeared, his brow furrowing as he took in the stranger's nervous demeanor. Mary introduced the man, his name was Hector, and explained his situation. Daniel, though wary, nodded and escorted him to one of the counselors in the newly renovated office. Later that evening, after Hector had left with resources and a promise of further assistance, Daniel sat with Mary in the kitchen. "We need to be careful," Daniel said, his tone serious. "What if someone uses the center as a way to get close to us?" Mary stirred her tea thoughtfully. "We can't let fear stop us from helping people, Daniel. That's why we built this place. But I agree, we should be vigilant." That night, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that Hector's arrival was more than just coincidence. She lay awake, her thoughts spinning between hope and suspicion. The next day, Clara visited with an update. She mentioned that the investigation into the trafficking network had revealed several smaller cells still operating, though none appeared to be connected directly to their town. "But there's something else," Clara said, leaning forward in the living room. "Hector. The man who came to the center yesterday. I ran a background check on him after you mentioned him, just to be safe." Daniel tensed. "And?" Clara hesitated. "He's not directly tied to the network, but he has a history with one of its members. A former associate who's now in custody. It could be nothing, or it could mean he's being watched, and by extension, so are you." Mary's stomach sank. "Do you think he's a threat?" "I don't know yet," Clara admitted. But I'd recommend keeping an eye on him if he comes back. It might also be a good idea to let the authorities know if anyone else unusual shows up. Over the next week, Hector returned to the center twice, each time seeking help for his son. Mary noticed that he seemed genuine in his gratitude, though his nervousness never fully disappeared. Daniel, however, remained suspicious, watching Hector closely during each visit. One evening, as Mary was locking up the house after a long day, she noticed a car parked across the street. It was an old sedan, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. She felt a shiver of unease and quickly closed the door, locking it behind her. "Daniel," she called, finding him in the kitchen. "There's a car outside. I think it's been there all day." Daniel frowned and moved to the front window, peeking through the curtains. "Stay here," he said firmly, grabbing his phone as he stepped outside. Mary's heart raced as she watched through the window. Daniel approached the car cautiously, his phone ready to call Clara if needed. As he reached the driver's side, the window rolled down, and a woman's face appeared. She looked startled, then quickly held up her hands. "Wait. I'm not here to cause trouble," the woman said. "My name is Elena. I'm Hector's sister." Daniel paused, his suspicion still evident. "Why are you sitting outside our house?" Elena glanced around nervously. "I didn't know where else to go. Hector told me about this place, and I thought, maybe you could help me too. But I didn't want to scare anyone by just walking in." Daniel studied her for a moment before nodding. "Come inside. But if you're lying, this ends here." Once inside, Elena shared her story. She confirmed that Hector had distanced himself from the trafficking network years ago but was still being monitored by its remnants. She and Hector were trying to keep their family safe, but they didn't know who to trust. Mary listened carefully, her instincts telling her that Elena was telling the truth. "If you're in danger, you need to let Clara know," Mary said. "She can help." Elena hesitated, her fear evident. "I don't want to make things worse. They'll come after us if they think we're talking to the police." "We'll protect you," Daniel said firmly. "But you can't do this alone. Let us help." As the night wore on, Mary felt the weight of a new chapter unfolding. The house had become a place of refuge, but it also seemed to draw danger closer. She and Daniel would have to navigate these challenges carefully, balancing their desire to help with the need to protect what they had built. For Mary, one thing was clear: the fight wasn't over. But surrounded by people who believed in their cause, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The following morning, the air in the house felt heavy with the weight of Elena's revelations. Mary sat at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee, while Daniel paced the room. Elena and Hector were upstairs in one of the guest rooms, resting after a long night of confessions and planning. "We're getting in deeper, Mom," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "We've already dismantled part of this network, but now it feels like we've painted a target on ourselves." Mary took a sip of her coffee, her eyes fixed on the swirling steam. "We didn't choose this, Daniel. But we can't walk away now. If Hector and Elena are in danger, they came to us for a reason. We're their last hope." Before Daniel could respond, there was a soft knock at the front door. Both of them froze, exchanging a wary glance. Daniel moved cautiously to the door, peeking through the side window. "It's Clara," he said, relaxing slightly as he opened the door. Clara stepped inside, her expression serious. She carried a thick file under her arm and wasted no time getting to the point. "I've been digging into Hector and Elena's claims," she said as she set the file on the dining table. "They're telling the truth. Hector did have ties to the trafficking network years ago, but he cut all contact when his son was born. That decision put him on their radar as a potential liability. Elena's story checks out too, she's been trying to protect her family ever since." Mary's shoulders relaxed slightly, but Clara's next words erased any relief. "Unfortunately, their connection to the network has brought some attention to this house. I've received credible intel that members of the network are trying to find out how much you know. They're looking for weak points, and they won't hesitate to use threats to get what they want. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. So what do we do? Just sit here and wait for them to make a move? Clara shook her head. No. We need to stay ahead of them. I've already arranged for increased patrols in the area, and I've assigned plainclothes officers to keep an eye on the center and your home. But you need to be vigilant. If anything feels off, call me immediately. Mary leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. Clara, what about Hector and Elena? Are they safe here? For now, yes, Clara said. But this can't be a permanent solution. We're working on relocating them to a secure location, but it will take time to arrange. The conversation was interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Hector and Elena appeared, their faces drawn but determined. Hector cleared his throat, glancing between Mary and Daniel. I don't want to put you in more danger, he said. You've already done so much, and I can't ask you to risk your lives for us. Mary stood, walking over to him with a gentle but firm expression. You didn't ask, Hector. You came here because you needed help, and we gave it willingly. This house has always been a place for people to find refuge, and that won't change now. Hector's eyes glistened with gratitude, and he nodded. Thank you. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. Daniel spoke up, his voice steady. You don't need to repay us. But you do need to stay strong. We'll get through this together. The day passed in a flurry of preparations. Clara helped them secure the house further, adding reinforced locks and setting up motion sensors. The staff at the community center were discreetly informed of the situation, ensuring that everyone remained on high alert. As night fell, the house settled into a tense quiet. Mary sat in the living room with Daniel, Hector, and Elena, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. Outside, the street was unusually still, the faint hum of a passing car breaking the silence every now and then. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the backyard. Everyone jumped to their feet as Daniel grabbed a baseball bat from the corner of the room. Clara, who had stayed nearby, burst through the front door, her gun drawn. Stay inside, she barked, motioning for them to lock the doors behind her. Mary's heart pounded as she ushered everyone into the kitchen, away from the windows. Daniel stood by the back door, gripping the bat tightly. Minutes felt like hours as they waited in tense silence. Finally, Clara returned, her expression grim but composed. It was a warning, she said, holding up a piece of paper she'd found pinned to a broken fence post. The message was scrawled in bold, threatening letters. Stay out of our business, or you'll regret it. Mary's hands trembled as she read the note, but she quickly steadied herself. Clara, what do we do now? We keep going, Clara said firmly. This is intimidation, nothing more. They're trying to scare you into backing off. But the fact that they're resorting to this means they're desperate. We're getting closer to shutting them down completely. Mary nodded, her resolve hardening. Let them try to scare us. This house has survived worse, and so have we. As the night wore on, Mary and Daniel stayed awake, keeping watch over their home and their guests. The threat was real, but so was their determination. Whatever the network had planned, Mary was ready to stand her ground. This house, her family, and the people she had chosen to protect, they were worth fighting for. The morning after the warning was tense and quiet. The note had rattled everyone, but it had also solidified their determination. Mary woke early, brewing a pot of strong coffee before stepping onto the porch. The crisp morning air carried a sense of unease, but Mary pushed it aside, focusing on the tasks ahead. Inside, Daniel was already at work, organizing the day's schedule for the community center. Despite the looming threat, they refused to let fear paralyze them. The center had become a beacon for so many, and Mary was determined to ensure it remained that way. Hector and Elena joined them at the breakfast table. Hector's usual nervous energy seemed subdued, replaced by a quiet resolve. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady. "Maybe we shouldn't stay here any longer. The longer we're around, the more danger we bring to this house." Daniel looked up from his coffee, shaking his head. "Leaving won't solve anything. These people are already watching. If you run now, they'll see it as a victory, and they'll still come after you." Mary nodded, her gaze gentle but firm. "This house is meant to protect people, not send them away. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this, Hector." Before Hector could respond, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze for a moment, exchanging wary glances. Daniel stood and approached cautiously, peeking through the side window before opening it. Clara stepped inside, her expression as serious as ever. "I've got news," she said, setting a folder on the dining table. "And it's a mix of good and bad." Mary gestured for her to continue, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "First, the good news," Clara began. "We've identified key members of the trafficking network still operating in the area. Law enforcement is preparing to move in on several locations within the next 48 hours. It'll be a coordinated effort, and if everything goes as planned, we'll dismantle what's left of their operations." Daniel leaned forward, his voice filled with urgency. "And the bad news?" Clara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "The people we're targeting aren't going down quietly. They've been sending out feelers, trying to gather information on anyone they see as a threat, including you. That warning last night was just the beginning." Mary's jaw tightened. "Do you think they'll escalate?" "It's possible," Clara admitted. "But we're ready for it. My team is monitoring their movements closely. If they try anything, we'll know." As Clara spoke, a knock sounded at the door again, this one louder and more urgent. Daniel and Clara exchanged a quick glance before Clara motioned for him to stay back. She approached the door, her hand hovering near the holster at her side. "Who is it?" Clara called out, her voice firm. "It's Luis," a familiar voice answered. Luis was a trusted volunteer at the community center, a kind-hearted man who had been helping with the children's programs. Clara relaxed slightly and opened the door. Luis stepped inside, his face pale and his breathing ragged. I need to talk to you," he said, looking at Mary and Daniel. "It's about the center." Mary felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened?" Luis swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he gripped his jacket. "I overheard two men talking near the center last night. They didn't see me, but I heard enough. They're planning something. They kept saying the words, 'Send a message.'" Clara's expression darkened. "Did you recognize them? Can you describe them?" Luis nodded. "One of them had a scar across his left cheek, and the other, he had a tattoo on his neck. A snake." Clara immediately reached for her phone, relaying the details to her team. Mary placed a comforting hand on Luis's shoulder, her voice calm. "You did the right thing, Luis. Thank you for coming to us." After Luis left, Clara turned back to the group. "Scar and Snake. I know who they are, they're enforcers for the network. If they're targeting the center, we need to act fast." Mary's heart sank. The thought of the center, their haven, being attacked was unbearable. What can we do to protect it? Clara's jaw tightened. "I'll increase patrols around the area and station officers nearby. But it's possible they'll try something when the center is busiest, to make the biggest impact. We need to be ready." Daniel stood, his voice firm. "We'll close the center temporarily if we have to. I won't risk anyone getting hurt." Mary shook her head. "Closing it sends the wrong message. We built this place to stand against fear and violence. We can't let them win." Clara nodded in agreement. "If you're willing to keep it open, I'll make sure it's as secure as possible. But you'll need to prepare yourselves. This won't be easy. The rest of the day was spent fortifying the center. Mary and Daniel worked side by side with Clara's team, adding security cameras, reinforcing doors, and setting up emergency protocols. Volunteers were briefed on the situation, and parents were reassured that their children would be safe. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mary stood in the now silent center, her heart heavy but resolute. The storm was coming, but this time, she wasn't facing it alone. Daniel approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this, Mom," he said softly. Mary nodded, her voice steady. "We will. Because we have to." As the night deepened, the house and the center stood as a beacon of defiance, their lights cutting through the darkness. Whatever came next, Mary and Daniel were ready to face it together. The following day dawned heavy with anticipation. The community center opened as usual, its doors welcoming children and families, but a quiet tension lingered beneath the surface. Mary and Daniel moved through their tasks with a sense of purpose, their eyes constantly scanning for anything unusual. Clara had stationed officers discreetly around the area, their presence a silent reassurance. By mid-morning, the center was alive with activity. Children laughed as they worked on art projects, volunteers guided workshops, and a local musician played gentle tunes in the courtyard. Despite the looming threat, Mary felt a swell of pride. This was why they had fought so hard, to create a safe haven where hope could thrive. Around noon, as Mary helped a young boy with his painting, Daniel approached, his expression concerned but composed. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" Mary excused herself and followed Daniel to the small office near the back of the center. Clara was already there, reviewing a map spread across the desk. "We have a problem," Clara said without preamble. "One of my officers spotted Scar and Snake about 2 blocks away. They're parked in a black SUV, watching the center." Mary's stomach tightened, but she refused to let fear show. "What are they waiting for?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know yet. They might be waiting for the center to clear out so they can make a move, or they're trying to intimidate you by being seen." Daniel crossed his arms, his frustration evident. "We can't let them get any closer." "What's the plan?" Clara pulled out her phone. "I've already called for backup. We're not engaging them directly unless they try something, but my team is ready to intercept if necessary. For now, stay alert and keep everything running as normal. We don't want to alarm anyone." Mary nodded, her resolve firm. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect this place." The afternoon passed slowly, each moment stretching as Mary and Daniel carried on with their duties, all while keeping a watchful eye on the center's surroundings. Clara's officers maintained their positions, blending in with the flow of the neighborhood but ready to act at a moment's notice. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Scar and Snake made their move. The black SUV pulled up to the curb just outside the center. The men stepped out, their presence commanding immediate attention. Scar, with his disfiguring mark across his cheek, exuded menace, while Snake, tall and lean with a coiled tattoo winding up his neck, scanned the area with sharp, calculating eyes. Clara, who had been stationed nearby, intercepted them before they could step onto the property. She approached them with a commanding presence, her badge visible but her demeanor calm. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steady. "This is private property. Can I help you with something?" Scar smirked, his scar pulling at the corner of his mouth. "We're just here to look around. See what all the fuss is about." "This isn't the place for sightseeing," Clara replied, her tone firm but professional. "I suggest you move along." Snake stepped forward, his movements deliberate and unsettling. "You're awfully protective of this place. Makes us wonder why." Clara didn't flinch. "It's my job to ensure the safety of this community. And that means keeping people like you far away from it." For a moment, the tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats. But Scar and Snake didn't push further. They exchanged a glance before stepping back toward the SUV. "Tell Mary and her boy we said hi," Scar said with a mocking grin before climbing into the vehicle. As the SUV drove away, Clara immediately contacted her team, relaying the encounter and instructing them to track the vehicle. She returned to the center, where Mary and Daniel were waiting anxiously. "They're gone for now," Clara said, her tone serious. "But they're testing us. They want to see how far they can push." Mary straightened, her eyes blazing with determination. "Let them test us. We won't back down." Daniel nodded in agreement. "This place means too much to too many people. We'll fight for it, no matter what." Clara placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. "You're brave, Mary. But remember, we're in this together. You're not alone." As night fell, the center's doors closed, and the neighborhood grew quiet again. Mary and Daniel sat together in the kitchen, the weight of the day pressing heavily on them. "They'll come back," Daniel said quietly. Mary reached for his hand, her grip firm. "Then we'll be ready." The threat was real, but so was their resilience. The house and the center had faced shadows before, and Mary knew they would endure again. This was more than a fight for safety, it was a fight for everything they had built, for the hope and healing that now defined their lives. And they would not let it be taken from them. The night after Scar and Snake's appearance was restless. Mary stayed up late, sitting in the quiet of the living room with a cup of tea in her hands. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Her thoughts churned, replaying the day's events. Clara's words echoed in her mind, "They're testing us. They want to see how far they can push." Daniel emerged from the hallway, his hair disheveled and his expression tired. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Mary shook her head. "Too much on my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men standing outside the center, as if they're daring us to act." Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're not going to let them win, Mom. We've faced worse before. This time, we have Clara and her team on our side." Mary nodded but couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "It's not just about us, Daniel. The people who come to the center, the kids, they're counting on us to keep them safe." "We will," Daniel said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The next morning, the center opened as usual, though Mary and Daniel had taken extra precautions. Clara had stationed additional officers nearby, their presence subtle but reassuring. Volunteers were briefed on emergency protocols, and Mary made it a point to check on everyone personally. The day passed without incident, though the tension was palpable. Mary couldn't help but notice every unfamiliar face, every car that lingered a little too long near the center. By the time the sun began to set, she was physically and emotionally exhausted. As the staff began closing up for the evening, Hector approached Mary in the main hall. "Mary, can I talk to you for a moment?" She stopped what she was doing and turned to him. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Hector glanced around to make sure no one else was within earshot. "I've been thinking about what Scar said yesterday, about sending a message. They're not just trying to intimidate us, they're trying to scare everyone connected to this place. I know how these people operate. They won't stop until they feel like they've regained control." Mary folded her arms, her gaze steady. "What are you suggesting, Hector?" "I think I need to be the one to draw them out," he said quietly. "They're after me and my sister, not you. If I leave, maybe they'll back off from the center." Mary's stomach turned at the thought. "Hector, that's too dangerous. If you go out there alone, they'll have exactly what they want. You'll be putting yourself in harm's way for no reason." Before Hector could respond, Daniel joined them, having overheard the conversation. "Hector, she's right. Running won't solve this. It'll only make it easier for them to target you, and once they're done with you, they'll come right back here. Hector sighed, his shoulders slumping. I just don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. Mary placed a hand on his arm, her voice gentle but firm. You're not responsible for their actions, Hector. What matters is that we stand together. Dividing ourselves will only make us weaker. Reluctantly, Hector nodded, and they returned to their tasks, though the weight of the conversation lingered. That night, as Mary prepared to leave, Clara arrived with urgent news. We've intercepted some chatter, she said, her voice clipped. They're planning to make their move tonight. Mary's heart sank. Here. At the center. Clara nodded. They're not going to wait any longer. We've set up a sting operation. My team is in position, but I need you to stay calm and follow my instructions. Daniel stepped forward, his expression fierce. What do you need us to do? Stay out of sight, Clara said. We'll handle this. But if anything happens, call me immediately. Mary and Daniel returned to the house, locking the doors and keeping watch from the windows. The hours dragged by, every sound amplified by the silence of the night. Around midnight, Mary's phone buzzed. It was Clara. It's happening, she said, her voice tense but controlled. Scar and Snake are at the center. They're trying to break in. Mary's grip on the phone tightened. Are you safe? We've got eyes on them, Clara replied. Just stay put. The next 15 minutes felt like an eternity. Mary paced the living room, her heart pounding as she imagined the confrontation unfolding at the center. Finally, Clara called again. It's over, she said, and Mary could hear the relief in her voice. We've got them in custody. No one was hurt. The operation went exactly as planned. Mary sank into a chair, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you, Clara. I don't know how to thank you enough. You've already done more than enough, Mary, Clara said warmly. You stood your ground, and because of that, we've taken 2 more dangerous people off the streets. As Mary hung up the phone, Daniel came over, his expression a mix of exhaustion and pride. We did it, Mom. The center is safe. Mary nodded, her heart full. For now, yes. But we'll stay vigilant. This house, this center, it's worth fighting for. The night ended quietly, the house finally at peace after the storm. For Mary, Daniel, and the people they had vowed to protect, the fight wasn't just about survival, it was about creating a future filled with hope and resilience. And no matter what came next, they were ready. The morning after the operation was one of quiet relief, though the weight of the previous night's events still lingered in the air. Mary woke early, drawn to the garden where the soft light of dawn stretched across the roses she had tended for years. She knelt in the dirt, her hands methodically pulling weeds, the repetitive motion grounding her as her mind replayed Clara's words from the night before, "It's over. We've got them in custody." Inside, Daniel was on the phone with Clara, getting the latest updates on Scar and Snake. When he joined Mary in the garden, his expression was a mix of determination and weariness. "They've already started interrogating Scar and Snake," Daniel said as he crouched beside her. "Clara thinks they'll give up the names of the other people involved. It's a big step forward, but she also said this isn't the end." Mary wiped her hands on her apron and sat back on her heels. "I didn't think it would be. People like them don't stop just because a few of their own are behind bars. They'll regroup, find new ways to operate." Daniel frowned, his jaw tightening. "So, what do we do? Just wait for the next wave?" "No," Mary said firmly, meeting his gaze. "We keep building. We keep helping people. The more good we do, the less power they'll have. They can't scare us into silence, Daniel. Not anymore." By midday, the community center was bustling again, though the tension from the recent events was still palpable. Parents lingered a little longer as they dropped off their children, their eyes scanning the surroundings for anything out of place. Volunteers worked with a renewed sense of purpose, their smiles warm but edged with vigilance. Mary moved through the center, offering words of reassurance and gratitude to everyone she passed. She stopped by the art room, where a group of children sat painting under the guidance of Hector. His son, a bright-eyed boy named Mateo, was among them, his laughter filling the room as he held up a messy but cheerful drawing of a house surrounded by flowers. "Look, Ms. Mary," Mateo said, running over to show her. "This is our house now. It's safe, right?" Mary knelt down to his level, her heart swelling. "It's very safe, Mateo. And it's beautiful, just like your drawing." Mateo beamed, running back to his seat while Hector approached, his expression a mix of gratitude and lingering concern. "Mary," he said quietly, "thank you for everything. I know this hasn't been easy, but you've given us a chance to start over." Mary placed a hand on his arm, her voice gentle but firm. "You deserve that chance, Hector. You and Mateo both. And this isn't just my work, it's all of us, together." As the day wore on, Mary found herself reflecting on how far they had come. The center, once just a vision, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. But it was also a constant reminder of the challenges they had faced, and the ones still to come. That evening, Clara stopped by with a new update. She joined Mary and Daniel in the living room, her expression more relaxed than it had been in weeks. "Scar and Snake talked," Clara began, setting her folder on the coffee table. "They gave us names, locations, and details about the remaining parts of the network. We've already started planning a series of raids." Daniel exhaled sharply, relief mixing with cautious optimism. "That's incredible. Does that mean this will finally end?" Clara hesitated, her gaze steady. "It's a significant blow to the network, but it won't erase them entirely. These organizations are like weeds, you pull one out, and another sprouts somewhere else. But every operation we shut down means fewer lives are affected, fewer people hurt." Mary nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we keep going. We keep fighting, no matter how long it takes." Clara smiled faintly, admiration shining in her eyes. "You're stronger than most people I know, Mary. This center, this house, it's more than just a place. It's a symbol of what can happen when people stand together." As Clara left, Mary and Daniel sat together in the living room, the quiet of the house settling around them. "Do you think things will ever feel normal again?" Daniel asked after a long silence. Mary looked at him, her gaze steady and full of love. "I don't know if we'll ever go back to what we thought was normal, Daniel. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe this is our new normal, fighting for what matters, protecting what we've built." Daniel nodded, his expression softening. "If this is our new normal, I think I'm okay with that." The night passed peacefully, the house once again a haven for those within it. But Mary knew that peace was fragile, a flickering light that needed constant tending. As she drifted off to sleep, her thoughts turned to the future, a future she was determined to shape with courage, hope, and unwavering love. The following days brought a tentative calm, though vigilance remained high. The raids Clara's team had organized swept through the nearby cities, dismantling several remnants of the trafficking network. Each successful operation brought a mixture of relief and caution, progress was being made, but the fight wasn't over. At the community center, life began to feel lighter again. Children ran through the hallways, their laughter echoing as they played games and painted murals on the walls. Volunteers worked tirelessly, their energy renewed by the victories Clara had shared. Mary stood in the main hall, watching as a group of teenagers hung decorations for an upcoming event. The center was hosting a Hope Gala, a fundraiser in celebration of resilience for the families who had found sanctuary within its walls. The idea had come from Daniel, who wanted to show the community that they were stronger together. "Mom," Daniel called, stepping into the hall with a clipboard in hand, "do we have enough space for the art exhibit? Some of the kids made extra pieces, and I don't want to leave any of them out." Mary smiled, her heart swelling with pride at his commitment. "We'll make room. Every piece deserves to be seen." As they worked side by side, Hector approached, his son Mateo trailing behind him. Hector carried a small wooden box, his expression both nervous and hopeful. "Mary, Daniel," Hector said, holding the box out to them. "I wanted to contribute something for the gala. It's not much, but," he opened the box, revealing delicate carvings of birds and flowers, each one painstakingly detailed. Mary gasped softly, reaching out to pick up a small wooden dove. "Hector, these are beautiful. Did you make these?" He nodded, his cheeks flushing. "I used to carve wood for extra money before everything fell apart. Mateo helped me with the painting." Mateo grinned proudly. "I painted the wings." Mary exchanged a warm glance with Daniel before turning back to Hector. "These are perfect. We'll display them at the gala, and I'm sure people will love them." As the days counted down to the event, the center hummed with activity. Volunteers hung strings of lights, polished tables, and arranged flowers donated by local businesses. The children worked on performances, from singing to storytelling, eager to share their talents. The night of the gala arrived, and the center sparkled with life. Guests poured in, many of them families who had been touched by the center's work. Mary greeted each person with a smile, her heart swelling as she saw the transformation the space had undergone. As the event unfolded, Mary found a moment to step back and take it all in. The art exhibit was a stunning display of creativity and resilience, with Hector's carvings as the centerpiece. Children performed on a small stage, their voices strong and full of hope. Guests mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Clara arrived midway through the evening, dressed in formal attire that was a rare departure from her usual practical wardrobe. She approached Mary and Daniel with a small smile. "This is incredible," Clara said, gesturing to the bustling room. "You've built something truly special here." "We couldn't have done it without you," Mary said sincerely. Clara shook her head. "You're the heart of this place, Mary. I'm just glad I could help." As the night wore on, Daniel took to the stage to deliver a short speech. He looked out at the crowd, his voice steady but emotional. "This center was born out of struggle, but it's become a place of hope," he said. "It's a reminder that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. Tonight, we celebrate that resilience, not just in this building, but in all of you." The crowd erupted into applause, and Mary felt tears prick her eyes. She had always believed in the power of community, but seeing it come alive in such a profound way was overwhelming. Later that night, as the guests began to leave and the lights dimmed, Mary and Daniel stood in the quiet of the main hall. "We did it," Daniel said softly, his voice tinged with awe. Mary smiled, leaning against him. "We did. And it's only the beginning." For the first time in months, the future felt bright. The house, the center, and the people they had fought to protect were thriving. And though challenges would surely come, Mary knew they had the strength to face them, together. The morning after the gala was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that felt well-earned. Mary stood in the kitchen, the soft hum of the coffee machine filling the air as sunlight streamed through the windows. She smiled to herself, thinking about the success of the event. The community had rallied together in ways she hadn't thought possible months ago. The center had raised enough funds to expand its programs and strengthen its security, a critical step in ensuring its future. Daniel walked in, yawning and running a hand through his hair. "Morning, Mom," he said, grabbing a mug from the cupboard. "I'm still trying to process last night. Did you see how many people showed up?" Mary poured his coffee, chuckling softly. "I saw, Daniel. It was incredible. I just wish your father could have been there to see it." Daniel's expression softened, a bittersweet smile crossing his face. "He would have been proud. Of both of us." They sat together at the table, enjoying the calm before the day began. But their moment of peace was interrupted by a knock at the door. Daniel tensed immediately, his instincts kicking in as he stood to answer. He glanced through the window and relaxed slightly. "It's Clara," he said, opening the door. Clara stepped inside, her expression a mix of exhaustion and urgency. She carried a tablet tucked under her arm and a thin stack of papers in her hand. "Good morning," she said, though her tone was far from casual. "I need to talk to you both. Something's come up." Mary gestured for Clara to sit, her heart sinking slightly at the detective's serious demeanor. "What is it, Clara?" Clara placed the tablet on the table, pulling up a series of images. They were grainy surveillance photos, but the figures in them were unmistakable, new players in the trafficking network. "These were taken last night, while the gala was happening," Clara began. "It seems like some members of the network were testing the waters, observing from a distance. They didn't make a move, but their presence is concerning." Mary leaned forward, her brow furrowing. "Why would they come here? They know this place is being watched." Clara nodded. "That's what makes this alarming. These aren't the same people we've been dealing with, they're new faces, possibly higher-ups who are taking a more direct interest in what's happening here. They're not just after Hector and Elena anymore. They're targeting the center itself." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. "Why? The center has nothing to do with them. It's a safe space for the community." "It's more than that now," Clara said. "This center has become a symbol of resistance. It's proof that their threats and intimidation tactics don't work here. That's a threat to their power." Mary exhaled slowly, her mind racing. "What do we do?" Clara pulled out the stack of papers, spreading them across the table. "We take precautions, starting with tightening security even further. I've already requested additional patrols and surveillance around the area. But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that they'll escalate." Mary nodded, her expression resolute. "Whatever it takes, Clara. We're not backing down." The rest of the day was spent in preparation. Clara coordinated with her team, ensuring the center and the house were as secure as possible. Daniel reached out to the volunteers, explaining the situation without causing unnecessary panic. Mary focused on the families who relied on the center, reassuring them that everything was under control. As the sun set, Mary found herself standing in the backyard, staring at the garden she had worked so hard to nurture. The roses swayed gently in the evening breeze, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in her mind. Daniel joined her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever feel like we're in over our heads?" he asked quietly. Mary turned to him, her gaze steady. "Sometimes. But then I look at what we've accomplished, and I know we're exactly where we need to be." Daniel nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Mom." Mary reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "We're strong together, Daniel. That's how we've made it this far." The next few days passed without incident, but the tension remained. Clara stayed in close contact, updating Mary and Daniel on the investigation's progress. The surveillance around the center revealed no immediate threats, but the knowledge that they were being watched was a constant shadow. One afternoon, as Mary prepared for an upcoming community meeting, she noticed a man standing across the street. He was dressed casually, but something about his stance felt deliberate. His gaze lingered on the center for a moment before he walked away. Mary's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. She quietly alerted Clara, who promised to investigate. That night, as Mary sat in the living room with Daniel, a sense of resolve washed over her. The challenges they faced were daunting, but she refused to let fear dictate their lives. "This house," Mary said softly, breaking the silence, "it's more than just a home now. It's a beacon. And no matter how hard they try, they can't extinguish that light." Daniel looked at her, his expression a mix of pride and determination. "Then we'll keep it burning, Mom." No matter what. The night deepened, the stars shining brightly over the house. Inside, Mary and Daniel prepared for whatever lay ahead, their bond unshakable and their purpose clear. The fight wasn't over, but they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days following Mary's sighting of the man across the street were tense but purposeful. Clara intensified her investigation, setting up more discreet surveillance around the center and the house. Mary and Daniel maintained their routines, outwardly calm, but both felt the weight of the unspoken threat pressing down on them. One afternoon, as Mary prepared materials for an upcoming children's art class, Clara arrived unexpectedly. She walked into the main office, her expression grim and her phone in hand. "We need to talk," Clara said, her tone low. Mary and Daniel stopped what they were doing, their attention immediately focused. Clara set her phone on the desk and swiped to display a photo, a grainy image of a man sitting in a car, partially obscured by shadows. "This is the man you saw across the street," Clara said, her voice steady. "We identified him. His name is Marcos. He's not just anyone, he's a high-ranking enforcer for the network. He's known for being patient, meticulous, and ruthless." Daniel frowned, leaning closer to the image. "What's he doing here? Why would someone that high up be watching us?" Clara sighed, her shoulders tense. "That's what we're trying to figure out. His presence here suggests that the network sees this place as a significant threat. They wouldn't send someone like him unless they had a reason to." Mary's stomach churned, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Do you think he's planning something?" Clara nodded. "It's likely. Marcos is the kind of man who doesn't act without a plan. My team is monitoring him closely, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that he'll escalate." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mary and Daniel worked tirelessly to implement additional safety measures at the center, while Clara's team maintained a watchful eye on the surrounding area. Volunteers were briefed discreetly, and the families who visited the center were subtly encouraged to stay vigilant. That evening, as Mary and Daniel returned home, the tension was palpable. Daniel checked the locks on every door and window before sitting down with Mary at the kitchen table. "I don't like this, Mom," Daniel said, his voice tight with frustration. "It feels like we're waiting for something to happen, and we can't do anything to stop it." Mary reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on his. "I know it feels that way, Daniel. But we're not powerless. We've taken every precaution we can, and we have Clara on our side. We just have to stay strong." Later that night, Mary stood at the window of her bedroom, staring out into the quiet street. The house was dark and still, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence, a distant scrape, like metal against concrete. Mary's heart leapt as she moved to wake Daniel, who was sleeping in the room down the hall. "Daniel," she whispered urgently, shaking his shoulder. "I heard something outside." Daniel shot up, instantly alert. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by his bed and followed Mary to the living room, where they peeked through the curtains. At first, the street appeared empty, but then Mary spotted a figure near the corner of the yard. The man crouched low, his movements deliberate as he placed something near the edge of the property. Daniel's grip on the bat tightened. "I'm calling Clara," he said, reaching for his phone. Within minutes, Clara and her team arrived, their vehicles silent as they surrounded the property. The man bolted as soon as he spotted them, but Clara's officers were faster, tackling him to the ground before he could escape. Mary and Daniel stood on the porch, watching as Clara approached them, her expression grim. "He was planting a tracking device," Clara explained, holding up a small, black device. "They're trying to monitor your movements." Mary's chest tightened. "Why? What are they looking for?" "Leverage," Clara said simply. "They want to know everything about you, where you go, who you talk to, how vulnerable you are. It's a classic tactic, but now that we've caught him, they've lost that advantage." Daniel exhaled sharply, his frustration evident. What happens now? We'll interrogate him, Clara said. He might lead us to Marcos, or at least give us a clearer picture of what they're planning. In the meantime, I'll have officers stationed here 24/7. You're safe, Mary. We won't let anything happen to you or the center. As Clara's team secured the property and removed the tracking device, Mary and Daniel retreated inside. The reality of the situation weighed heavily on them, but Mary refused to let fear dictate her actions. The next morning, she stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea as sunlight filtered through the window. Daniel joined her, his expression tired but determined. "What's next, Mom?" he asked. Mary turned to him, her gaze steady. "We keep going. We focus on the center, on the people who rely on us. We don't let them win, Daniel. Not now, not ever." Daniel nodded, a small smile breaking through the tension. "Then that's what we'll do." Despite the growing threat, Mary and Daniel faced the day with renewed resolve. Their home and the center remained steadfast symbols of hope, and they were determined to protect them, no matter the cost. The morning after the attempted tracking device incident was quieter than expected, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Mary moved through the house with careful deliberation, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Daniel, however, couldn't mask his frustration. He paced the living room, his phone clutched tightly in his hand, waiting for an update from Clara. Finally, the phone buzzed. Daniel answered immediately, his voice sharp. "Clara? Any news?" On the other end, Clara's tone was calm but serious. "We've interrogated the man we apprehended. He's a low-level operative, doesn't know much beyond what he was told to do. But he confirmed one thing, Marcos is orchestrating a larger plan. He's fixated on the center, and he sees it as a personal challenge to his authority." Daniel frowned. "What kind of plan are we talking about?" "That's what we're still piecing together," Clara said. "But from what we've gathered, Marcos isn't just trying to scare you anymore. He wants to dismantle everything you've built, publicly and permanently. He's targeting the center because it represents defiance, a direct challenge to the network's influence." Mary, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. "How do we stop him, Clara? We can't keep waiting for him to make the first move." Clara's voice softened slightly. "I agree. We're ramping up our surveillance, focusing on Marcos and his known associates. If we can catch him in the act, we'll have what we need to bring him down for good. But until then, you need to stay cautious." After the call ended, Mary turned to Daniel, her expression firm. "We can't let fear paralyze us. The center is more than a building, it's a symbol of everything we've fought for. And that's why Marcos is targeting it. If we show him we're afraid, he wins." Daniel nodded, though his worry was evident. "I know you're right, Mom. But it feels like we're walking on a knife's edge." Mary placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's why we have to trust Clara and her team. They're watching our backs so we can focus on what matters, helping the people who rely on us." Later that day, the center was bustling with activity. Children played in the courtyard, volunteers organized supplies, and staff worked on new programs to support families in need. Despite the underlying threat, the atmosphere was one of determination and hope. Mary found herself in the art room, helping a group of children paint a mural on one of the walls. Bright colors and whimsical designs began to take shape, transforming the once plain surface into a vibrant celebration of resilience and unity. As she guided a young girl's hand to steady her brush, Mary felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why she had fought so hard, why she couldn't let Marcos or anyone else tear down what they had built. In the corner of the room, Daniel was talking to Hector, who had become an invaluable part of the center's community. Hector's carvings from the gala had been a hit, and he was now teaching a woodworking class for teenagers. "Have you noticed anything unusual today?" Daniel asked quietly, his gaze flicking toward the windows. Hector shook his head. No, everything seems normal. But I've been keeping an eye out, just in case. Daniel nodded, appreciating Hector's vigilance. Good. Let me know if that changes. As the sun set, the center began to wind down for the evening. Parents arrived to pick up their children, and the staff started cleaning up for the day. Mary stood at the front doors, bidding everyone good night with her usual warmth. Just as she was about to close the doors, she noticed a black car parked at the far end of the street. It was partially obscured by the shadows of the trees, but Mary's instincts told her it didn't belong there. She stepped back inside, locking the doors before calling Daniel over. There's a car outside, she said quietly. I don't recognize it. Daniel immediately called Clara, describing the vehicle. Within minutes, one of Clara's officers arrived, parking discreetly nearby to monitor the situation. The car didn't move for hours, but its presence was unsettling. It was a stark reminder that Marcos was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. A message from the shadows. The next morning, as Mary and Daniel arrived at the center to open for the day, they found something chilling on the front steps, a single black feather tied with a thin red ribbon. Mary's breath caught in her throat as she picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. This is a message, she said, her voice low. Daniel's face darkened. What does it mean? It's a warning, Mary said, her resolve hardening. They want us to know they're close, that they're watching. Clara arrived shortly after, inspecting the feather and the ribbon. This is Marcos's signature, she confirmed. It's a scare tactic. He wants to make you second-guess every move you make. Mary's gaze was steady as she looked at Clara. Then he's underestimated us. We're not backing down. Clara nodded, a faint smile of admiration on her lips. That's exactly the attitude we need, Mary. But stay vigilant. We'll find him, and when we do, this ends. The center's strength. As the day unfolded, Mary and Daniel focused on keeping the center running smoothly, refusing to let the feather distract them. Volunteers and staff followed suit, their resilience shining through. In the face of growing threats, the center remained a sanctuary of hope. And though the shadow of Marcos loomed closer, Mary knew one thing for certain: they would stand their ground, together. The black feather and its ominous red ribbon hung over Mary and Daniel's minds like a storm cloud. The message was clear: Marcos was watching, and he wanted them to feel the weight of his presence. But Mary refused to let fear paralyze her. If Marcos wanted to rattle her, he would fail. That morning, Clara arrived at the center with an update. Her expression was as composed as ever, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. She motioned for Mary and Daniel to join her in the office, where she unrolled a map and laid it across the desk. We've tracked Marcos to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, Clara said, pointing to a marked location. It's one of their last operational hubs in the area. If we can catch him there, we'll cut off his influence entirely. Daniel frowned, leaning over the map. What's the plan? Clara glanced between them. We're organizing a raid for tonight. It'll be a coordinated effort with local and federal authorities. We're going to surround the building and take everyone inside into custody. Mary's chest tightened. Do you think he'll resist? Clara nodded grimly. Marcos isn't the type to surrender quietly. He's dangerous, Mary. This could get messy. Daniel straightened, his jaw set. What do you need from us? Stay here, Clara said firmly. Keep the center and the house secure. I don't want you anywhere near this operation, it's too risky. My team will handle it. The waiting game. As night fell, Mary and Daniel returned home, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. Clara had stationed officers around the property, their presence a reassuring reminder that they were not alone. Mary sat in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she stared at the clock. Daniel paced near the window, his phone in hand, ready for Clara's call. "Do you think they'll get him?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Mary's gaze didn't waver from the clock. "They have to. If they don't, he'll keep coming after us, after the center. This is our best chance." The hours dragged on, each tick of the clock feeling like a hammer against their nerves. Finally, around midnight, Daniel's phone buzzed. He answered immediately, putting the call on speaker. "Clara," he said. "It's done," Clara said, her voice steady but tired. "The raid was successful. We have Marcos in custody, along with several of his top associates. There were no casualties, and we recovered a significant amount of evidence from the warehouse." Mary exhaled sharply, relief washing over her like a wave. "Thank God," she whispered. "It's over." "Almost," Clara said. "We still have work to do. But this is a major victory. Marcos won't be able to hurt anyone else, not from behind bars." The aftermath. The next morning, the news of Marcos's arrest spread quickly. The community center was abuzz with cautious optimism as families and volunteers learned that the immediate threat had been neutralized. Clara stopped by the house later that afternoon, her demeanor lighter than Mary had ever seen. "I wanted to thank you both," she said as she sat at the kitchen table. "This wouldn't have been possible without your courage. The evidence we gathered at the center and your willingness to stand your ground, it all led to this moment." Mary smiled, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "We couldn't have done it without you, Clara. You've been our shield through all of this." Clara shook her head. "You've been the heart of it, Mary. The center isn't just a place, it's a symbol of hope, and that's what scares people like Marcos. You've shown them that fear doesn't win." Daniel, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "What happens now? Is it really over?" Clara's expression grew thoughtful. "For now, yes. But there will always be people like Marcos, people who thrive on control and intimidation. The fight doesn't end, but we've proven that standing together works. The center, this house, your community, it's stronger than ever." A moment of peace. That evening, Mary stood in the backyard, the soft glow of the setting sun casting a golden light over her roses. Daniel joined her, a quiet smile on his face. "It feels different now," he said, leaning against the wooden fence. "Like we can finally breathe again." Mary nodded, her gaze fixed on the garden. "We've been through so much, Daniel. But we didn't just survive, we built something lasting. Something that matters." Daniel looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You never gave up, Mom. Even when it felt impossible." Mary turned to him, her smile warm. "Neither did you. And that's why we're here, together." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, the house stood as a testament to their resilience. The fight had been long and harrowing, but Mary and Daniel had come out stronger, their bond unbreakable. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, they had faced the darkness and found the light. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew they could overcome them, together. The days following Marcos's arrest brought a newfound sense of relief, but also an understanding that the fight wasn't entirely over. While the immediate threat to the center and Mary's family had been neutralized, the ripples of Marcos's influence still lingered. Clara remained a steady presence, coordinating with her team to dismantle the remnants of the network. Mary, however, chose to focus on healing the community. The center buzzed with renewed energy, its staff and volunteers working harder than ever to provide support for families who had been affected by the network's reach. The center had become a sanctuary not just for its visitors but for Mary and Daniel as well, a constant reminder of what they had fought so hard to protect. One evening, as the day wound down, Mary found herself in her office at the center, sorting through a stack of thank you notes from children and parents. The messages were simple but heartfelt. "Thank you for making this place feel like home. Because of the center, I feel safe again. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she read each note, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. A surprising visit. The peaceful evening was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Mary looked up to see Hector standing in the doorway, his expression hesitant but warm. "Do you have a minute?" Hector asked, holding a small wooden box. "Of course," Mary said, gesturing for him to sit. Hector placed the box on her desk, carefully opening it to reveal a beautifully carved plaque. It depicted the center's logo surrounded by roses, with the words, "Resilience blooms here," etched into the wood. "I wanted to give you this," Hector said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's my way of saying thank you, for everything you've done for me, for Mateo, and for everyone who's walked through these doors. You saved my life, Mary." Mary reached out, her hand resting gently on his. "Hector, you've given as much as you've received. Your strength, your kindness, they've inspired so many people here, including me." Hector smiled, his eyes glistening. "I never thought I'd find a place like this, a place where people truly care. You've built something incredible, Mary." Daniel's new role. Meanwhile, Daniel had taken on a larger role at the center, managing day-to-day operations and mentoring teens who were struggling to find their way. His natural charisma and genuine care made him a favorite among the kids, who often sought him out for advice or just to share a laugh. One afternoon, Clara stopped by to see Daniel in action. She watched from a distance as he helped a group of teenagers assemble a bookshelf, his encouraging words filling the room. When Daniel spotted her, he walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Clara," he said with a grin. "What brings you by?" "I wanted to check in," Clara said, her tone light. "And I have to say, you're a natural at this. These kids look up to you." Daniel chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm just trying to pay it forward. The center saved me too, you know." Clara's expression softened. "You've come a long way, Daniel. Your father would be proud." Daniel's smile faltered for a moment, but he nodded. "Thanks, Clara. That means a lot." A celebration of hope. As the weeks passed, the center began planning a celebration to mark its success in standing against the odds. The event, called A Night of Hope, was meant to honor the community's resilience and acknowledge the work that still lay ahead. Mary and Daniel worked tirelessly to prepare for the night, enlisting volunteers to decorate the center with strings of lights and banners bearing messages of unity and hope. Hector and Mateo helped craft wooden centerpieces for the tables, while the children painted colorful murals to display on the walls. When the night of the celebration arrived, the center was transformed into a beacon of light and joy. Families filled the space, their laughter and chatter creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. A small stage had been set up in the courtyard, where performances and speeches were planned. Mary stood near the stage, watching the crowd with a mixture of pride and humility. She spotted Clara mingling with the guests, her usually serious demeanor softened by a rare smile. As the evening progressed, Daniel stepped onto the stage to deliver a speech. The crowd quieted, their attention focused on him as he began to speak. This center was built on the belief that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward, Daniel said, his voice steady but full of emotion. It's not just a building, it's a testament to the strength of this community, to the people who refuse to let fear win. Mary watched, her heart swelling with pride as Daniel continued. We've faced challenges, and we've stood together. Tonight, we celebrate that resilience, but we also remind ourselves that the work isn't over. Together, we can keep making a difference. The crowd erupted into applause, and Mary felt tears prick her eyes as she joined in. A quiet moment. As the celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, Mary found a moment to herself in the garden. The soft glow of the lights cast a warm hue over the roses, their blooms a symbol of the center's growth and strength. Daniel joined her, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. He handed one to her, clinking their glasses together. To the future, Daniel said with a small smile. Mary nodded, her eyes shining. To the future. And to never giving up. They stood in silence, the hum of the celebration fading into the background as they looked out at the garden. The fight had been long and grueling, but the light they had cultivated, through love, determination, and unwavering hope, now shone brighter than ever. The future was uncertain, but Mary and Daniel were ready to face it together, knowing they had built something that would endure. The morning after the Night of Hope celebration was serene, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Mary's house, casting soft patterns on the wooden floors. Mary sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, savoring the stillness. Daniel entered moments later, his face relaxed but tired. "Morning, Mom," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "You were amazing last night." Mary smiled, her fingers curling around her mug. "I think we all were. The center, the community, it's stronger than I ever imagined." Daniel nodded, leaning against the counter. "Clara stopped by after you went to bed. She said the information they got from Marcos's arrest has led to even more breakthroughs. They're dismantling the network piece by piece." Mary's expression grew thoughtful. "It's good to hear, but it's not just about taking them down, Daniel. It's about what comes after. Healing takes time, and we have to make sure the people who were hurt have what they need to move forward." Daniel set his coffee down and crossed the room, sitting beside her. "You're right. And that's what the center is for. It's not just a place, it's a promise. That no one has to go through this alone." Mary reached out, squeezing his hand. "You've grown so much, Daniel. Your father would be so proud of the man you've become." An unexpected guest. Later that day, as Mary and Daniel were tidying up the garden, a car pulled up to the curb. They exchanged a curious glance before walking to the gate. A woman stepped out, her posture hesitant but composed. She looked to be in her early 40s, her eyes sharp but kind. "Can I help you?" Mary asked, her voice gentle. The woman smiled faintly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "My name is Teresa. I wanted to thank you." Mary tilted her head, puzzled. "Thank me? I'm not sure I understand." Teresa nodded, her gaze steady. "You don't know me, but I know what you've done. My younger brother was one of the people rescued because of the raids. He's safe now, and he's starting to heal. That wouldn't have been possible without your bravery." Mary's breath caught, and Daniel stepped closer, his expression softening. "Your brother, how is he doing?" "He's scared, but he's alive," Teresa said. "And that's more than I ever hoped for. The work you're doing here, it changes lives. I just wanted you to know that." Mary felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you for telling us. It means more than I can say." Teresa lingered for a moment, her eyes glistening with gratitude, before she returned to her car and drove away. As Mary and Daniel stood in silence, the weight of her words settled over them like a gentle but profound reminder of why they had fought so hard. A turning point. The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity. The center's programs expanded to include trauma counseling and legal aid for families impacted by the network. Clara, though busy with ongoing investigations, remained a trusted ally, often stopping by to check in. One afternoon, as Mary walked through the bustling center, she noticed a young girl sitting alone in the art room, her head bowed over a blank canvas. Mary approached, her voice soft. "Hi there. Is everything all right?" The girl, no older than 10, looked up with wide, uncertain eyes. "I don't know what to paint," she admitted. Mary smiled, sitting beside her. "That's okay. Sometimes it helps to start with something that makes you happy. What makes you smile?" The girl thought for a moment, then said quietly, "Flowers. My mom used to grow them." Mary's heart ached at the unspoken sadness in the girl's words, but she kept her smile warm. "Flowers are a wonderful idea. how about I help you get started? Together, they began sketching vibrant petals and delicate stems, the girl's laughter eventually breaking through her initial shyness. By the time the session ended, her canvas was a riot of colors, each stroke a step toward healing. A legacy of hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Mary and Daniel stood in the backyard. The roses bloomed vibrantly, their petals glowing in the golden light. "This place has been through so much," Daniel said, his voice quiet. "But it's stronger now. Just like us." Mary nodded, her gaze sweeping over the house and the garden. "It's more than just a home now. It's a symbol of what's possible when people refuse to give up." Daniel turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think Dad knew it would be this way? That his legacy would grow into something this big?" Mary smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I think he believed in us. He knew we were capable of more than we ever imagined." As they stood together, a sense of peace settled over them. The fight hadn't been easy, and the scars it left behind would remain. But the love, resilience, and hope they had cultivated would endure, creating a brighter future for everyone who walked through the doors of the center. The house, the garden, the community, they were all part of a legacy built on the strength of people who refused to let darkness win. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Mary and Daniel knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together.